Salagadoola, menchikaboola, bibbidi bobbidi boo.
How do you add to a story that everyone already knows, to make it feel unique yet familiar, transforming its structure until it evolves its own identity? Well, if you're Amelia Blitzfeld, you tell it from a different perspective, one whose experience you have a stronger connection to, whose life mirrors your own.
I really related to that.
You personalize it, allowing your individuality to mold it into its own entity that reflects your own perspective, creating a piece of art as unique as yourself, even if the basic outline of the story feels familiar. You manipulate its elements to emphasize the themes most relevant to you, the ones that address the topics you've experienced, that directly affect you.
I've lived my fair share of trying to fit within the beauty ideals and know how, horrible that can be.
We all know the story of Cinderella, the glass slipper, the fairy godmother, the pumpkin carriage, but what happens when we deviate from the usual approach, when we look at it from another point of view? Well, we get The Ugly Stepsister, a film whose title alludes to its priorities, focusing on the experience of those around Cinderella, the ones who don't fit the conventional standards of beauty like the title character, and how such oppressive expectations slowly deteriorate the women subject to them. As the title suggests, the Ugly Stepsister doesn't follow Cinderella, but her stepsister, Elvira, completely transforming the story's tone and themes, reframing them around the expected villain instead of the victim, compounded even further by dramatic cinematography that not only captures but heightens the grotesque imagery that propels the film into the grimy subgenres of horror fitting for the visceral topics the film explores. Social pressures, cosmetic surgeries, eating disorders.
Yeah, I really wanted to make a beauty horror, I called it. So I really wanted to play with beauty and horror, what's beauty, what's ugly, and mix them and make them, juxtaposition them, look at the paradox of it.
Despite delving into a largely darker aesthetic though, the film doesn't totally abandon the fairy tale look, instead augmenting it to fit alongside its heavier tone, both making use of dim, candlelit rooms drenched in shadow, as well as natural soft lighting for more painterly scenes like they shot the film on a canvas. These visuals, though, all support the film's primary motivations, providing an alternative perspective of a classical story, redirecting its themes to address how society's unyielding standards for women can manipulate them into forming distorted, unhealthy views of themselves, their own bodies. Understanding the burdens placed on these characters, Blitzfeld doesn't simply vilify them, the story always contextualizing their actions even if it doesn't totally absolve them of guilt. Despite what its title may imply, The Ugly Stepsister doesn't switch the roles of villain and victim, having Cinderella become the perpetrator of trauma and the stepsister the victim of it. Instead, it provides insight into the factors that might cause someone to take the destructive actions Elvira does, using Cinderella's status as a standard of beauty to create a tangible point of contrast between how people view her as opposed to Elvira, adding perspective to the extreme standards women face in such a superficial society and the dangerous measures they might take to meet them.
Becoming the wicked stepsister, that she's not necessarily a good character the whole way through, and I thought that would be kind of just making another Cinderella character, So I knew that I had to tell a story that was kind of the origin story a little bit, like the first half of how does one become a wicked stepsister.
Approaching a story as well known as Cinderella requires an understanding of the audience's expectations, recognizing how they'll interact with the changes you plan to make. You see, turning a typically whimsical story into one more depressing, with heavier subject matter, transforms the meaning of familiar elements, costumes, characters, roles, to align with darker themes. A pair of shoes may hold a different purpose, providing a source of envy instead of curiosity or hope.
I just wanted to sprinkle it with these different versions, but let my version kind of be the original somehow. But make sure that there were like things in there that people would recognize, to always remind them and also kind of hack their relationships to the other versions of the story.
To explore these themes with an even more exaggerated tone, the film indulges in body horror, influenced by the likes of David Cronenberg and Dario Argento, starting out small but slowly increasing the intensity of its imagery and eventually climaxing with a series of stomach-churning scenes that visualize the grueling nature of bodily expectations and the pressure to conform to an unyielding standard of beauty.
Of course, David Cronenberg, my godfather, body horror, he introduced me to it. It's such a powerful genre also for female narratives, because being a woman is a very bodily experience.
Even beyond the grotesque mutilations of it though, the film also highlights the human body, showing it plainly, using nudity to give the audience insight into what the characters think of themselves, to provide a more informed, more intimate view of their insecurities. Such shots reveal the care and sincerity in the filmmaking, how much it means to Blitzfeld as both the writer and the director.
I'm not in filmmaking just to make any movie, you know. I have stories that I want to tell, and that's why I'm in movies. And I was questioning, you know, if anyone would ever give me the money to do it, but I decided quite early, this is what I want to do. If I can't make this movie, I won't make movies.
Blitzfeld had the idea for The Ugly Stepsister long before writing it, and even before she really knew how to write movies, her only previous experience coming from a handful of short films. Eventually though, with the support of those around her, she came to understand that she needed to do it instead of potentially passing it on to someone else. So she focused on learning to write so it had her voice, her style, her decisions that combined to create the unique story that only she could make.
For 5 years, I was teaching myself how to write with the help of a lot of great people that believed in the idea and me from the start. There's been people believing in me and helping me. Isabella Eklöf, who's also been here with Holiday a few years ago, she also met me, and she told me that I had to write it myself. Because she could really see how important that was.
Because of her experiences, Blitzfeld wanted the film to quell any viewers' insecurities about the way they look. The idea that they need to force themselves into some unrealistic, self-harming standard of beauty, but to instead accept themselves as they are, supporting all kinds of body types and faces. Holding this belief herself, she would never consider the actress portraying Elvira ugly, but the story still required that she, in some way, fail to meet society's typical standards of attractiveness, so the audience would understand why she feels so inadequate, why she eventually goes to such extreme lengths to change her appearance, barbaric and increasingly desperate mutilations of her own body. So, to make sure the film's message aligned with her own beliefs but still made sense for the character's experiences, Blitzfeld cast an actress with an atypical appearance, more distinct features, and added to her nose so that it looked more like Blitzfeld's, further connecting her to the character and her story.
When I was looking for Elvira, like, anyone could play her, because we're all stepsisters. So if you're not like a model or the beauty ideal, which is very few of us, you could be her. So I needed to find someone who would fit somehow within the beauty ideal, but that still could have this like otherness about them. And I think Leah, fits that perfectly.
As opposed to many other recent examples of classic children's stories turned into horror movies, The Ugly Stepsister has intention, a clear purpose that doesn't simply take advantage of its history and the recognition associated with it, but that transforms the original story, adjusting it to explore new, interesting ideas that pretty much everyone can relate to, but especially women. Like many of the best horror movies, it doesn't neglect the elements also found in other genres. It focuses on its characters, its story, and its themes, and simply intensifies them with horror's unique edge, creating a wholly distinct, tangible identity despite building on another story. Pretty impressive for a directorial debut. Thanks for watching.